Welcome to Masters of Product Management, powered by Sequent Learning Networks, a show that provides extraordinary insights for product managers who want to go faster and farther in their product management careers.
Hello, this is JJ Rory, Vice President at Sequent Learning Networks. In our Masters of Product Management podcast, we tap into the experiences of people who work in and around product management to help you learn and grow in your product management career. Our topic today is global product management, and I'm very excited to explore this with you and with our special guest. Launching and managing products across various global regions takes a special mindset and process. Whether it's differing laws and regulations or differing cultural aspects, there are nuances that must be accounted for in every new market entered. We can't just throw products into new markets without a lot of investigation and preparation and expect them to be successful. I'll share a short example from my career with you. Many years ago, I led a global product team for a financial services firm, and we worked on data and analytics products. So we took the data from the financial transactions and created products from that data. So business intelligence, insights types of products. So as we were launching products into different geographic markets, we obviously needed to understand the users and the needs and the competitive landscape, just like you do in any market you're in. But we also had to keenly understand the laws and regulations governing data privacy. And they were vastly different country to country and region to region. So as we were assessing new markets in which to potentially enter, we had to pay very close attention to how much development work, if any, needed to be done in order for us to be compliant with how we transmitted, stored, and shared data. And so again, thinking about the users, solving problems is very important for any product manager in any product. But when you're going from country to country, you really have to understand all of the nuances as well. Our guest today is an expert at launching and managing products in markets across the world. Colleen Knuff is Senior Director of Global Product Management at Wolters Kluwer. She runs a product called Teammate, which is a best-in-class software solution for internal auditors. Colleen has an interesting background, having spent a significant part of her career in public accounting at PwC, and then moving into a product management role. Probably going to pick your brain on that a little bit later. So Colleen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me today.
So let's set the stage. Tell us a little bit about Teammate, its history, what it does, for whom, and then a bit about your role and your team's role.
Sure. So Wolters Kluwer Teammate is an internal audit management solution that helps teams improve their transparency, their consistency, and their efficiency of their entire internal audit process. And our client base is global. So we sell software in over 115 countries around the world. They're comprised of private, public, and government agencies that are tasked with internal assurance activities. And those groups could range in size from just one or two people to groups that actually have thousands of people participating in the process. Internal audit is an interesting niche market. Not everyone knows what that means. So internal audit is really defined as anything from sort of the internal watchdog of an organization, all the way through to sort of a trusted advisor who independently and objectively evaluates risks and controls of the business. And in the case of government, maybe that's an agency or a program. So my role as head of product management is to develop and nurture a long-term global strategy for our product portfolio. And more importantly, to understand the needs of clients in each of those territories and industries, as well as by department size and maturity of their methodologies. And the first part of my job is actually quite easy to learn. There are lots of resources and training opportunities to learn how to build product portfolios and product strategies. But the second part, actually understanding customer needs, and as diverse as they may actually be across the globe, that's a lot harder, and it requires a lot more time and willingness to really get to know your clients.
That's amazing. 115 countries your products are in. That's just fascinating. So that brings me to what process you and your team undertake to assess whether a new market is attractive or not.
Yeah. So initially, when we were more in that startup mode, that was just simply having some prospects that seemed to be interested. But as we've matured and grown, we've offered a product in the market for over 20 years. So as we've matured through that process, we were a lot more careful in our approach. So for us, an initial step is to size the market and the maturity of that market space. And then we need to be realistic about how much of that market is likely to buy, because clearly you're not going to clean up as much as we all dream about that. That's generally not reality. We have to have some reasonably good data to inform us about the cost of entering a market, size of that addressable market, their needs, and so that you can sort of justify those costs. And if we can get past that step, then we need to assess what's the biggest pain point that that market actually has, because it may be different than any of the existing markets that we're currently selling our solution set into. So we need to start evaluating, so what specific pain point in that market would move the needle? Do we already have a solution for that? Is it just tweaking an existing solution? Do we actually need to create an entirely new solution? And then to what level of depth do we need to localize the application, our infrastructure, our market approach, and our team? So those are four very individual elements that go into that decision. And then, when you put all of this together, does that actually make that new market truly attractive?
Interesting. And I assume that you've actually gone through this assessment and found markets that were not attractive and have decided not to go into them?
Yeah, so sometimes what we assess is that it looks attractive on the surface. So for us, internal audit, it's interesting because in some countries it's mandated that particularly if you're a publicly traded company, you have to have an internal audit department. So that certainly helps us in that respect. And so we do follow sort of country laws, right? So recently, as an example, Vietnam recently passed regulations that require particularly financial institutions to have an internal audit practice where they didn't have to have one before. So that is one of those triggers that makes that market attractive for us to go in and evaluate. But what's interesting when we look at a market like Vietnam is, although there's a mandate now in place, like a lot of regulations, there's a longer runway on that. The second is that it's all new for them. So they're in the process of forming, internal audit departments in some cases and defining what they think their needs are. But because internal audit is also a new discipline for them, they're also trying to learn what that is. So those are some of the indicators where we're ready to move when the market is ready to move. But part of helping that market be ready to move in some cases is actually education processes around what does an internal audit methodology look like? What are some of the key things you need to have in place long before they actually look at purchasing software solutions? And if you can do those things, then of course you're sort of the logical next partner for them when they are ready to buy a solution. But at this point, it's one of those situations where it's like we're not quite ready to heavily invest because they're not quite ready to buy. So being able to judge that willingness to pay is a big part of that. Very
interesting. So you have to be ready to invest something, time, effort to educate before the return on that investment comes. So very interesting. Thank you for sharing that story. So what do you see as the biggest mistake that product managers or product leaders make when it comes to launching products in new geographic markets?
Well, the biggest mistake that I see them making is not really understanding the market, its needs, and its behaviors. So, to use a different example, like we might say that as a startup company based in North America, that we want to move into Latin America. That seems like a next logical progression for us. But the way we've designed our product, maybe it's, software as a service. So it's, SaaS subscription based, we're in the cloud. And for us, that cloud happens to be in the United States. So if you don't adjust your market sizing to eliminate things like prospects that might be concerned with maybe like the US Patriot Act, they don't want their data in the US, or, in areas and countries where they have poor connectivity. So they're still maybe looking for on-premise solutions. Then if you haven't adjusted for those things, you might actually be making the wrong decision. And I do see that happen. In those situations where they're like, oh, we'll just go with a local partner, and they're not really thinking through what maybe their infrastructure, how that comes into play. I've also seen situations where they don't understand the importance of a local presence. And so maybe that's where the partner piece comes in. And in some countries, they're only interested in working with you or dealing with you if you actually have a local in-country presence. So culturally, they might expect this in order for you to win the business. And if that's the case, and it's a market that you've decided from a market sizing perspective is attractive, do you actually have the capabilities to sort of ramp up and hire and train those resources, and then have the capacity to wait them out building out a sales pipeline? So sometimes competitors and product managers, product leaders will take that leap a little too quickly without understanding there's going to be this time frame where they have to ramp up. And then you get into things like globalization versus localization. So I've seen some small products just assume that they just need to translate their software, and boom, I just translate it into another language, and now I can go after that market. And that's not always the case either, because simply translating an application and offering it to that market might actually be more off-putting than if you'd have just gone in with the English-only version. And that's generally because you really need to be able to confirm the quality of the translation work. So unless, you happen to have, the resources on your own team that can do that, you're probably outsourcing that translation work. And anything from some business terms that may not be translated quite correctly, that can be a challenge. And so you probably need to find some local partners to ensure that you are using the right business terms. And then, further into that sort of globalization aspect of things, you have to start looking at things like resizing screens, perhaps rewriting messages, because of sort of like the Latin language as an example, right? Nouns have they're masculine or feminine. So the way you've worded certain things in English may not translate very well. So you might have to go back and rewrite messages. And you might actually have to turn off entire parts of an application because they just simply have no applicability in that market. So there's those things to consider. And then, as we discussed before, are they ready to buy? So they might have expressed an interest, but they really just don't have enough experience yet to actually make a buying decision. And that's where you're looking at perhaps partnering with them for training opportunities, and not so much at this point as far as selling solution sets.
Very good. And it's so apparent through this conversation that, launching into new markets is complex, and there are so many considerations. So you've been doing it now for many, many years and across many countries. So I greatly appreciate you sharing all of this. So I'm gonna change gears just a minute before we end. I'm fascinated by your background, as you know, and so I'm often asked by folks wanting to get into product management what the best career path is. And, is it best to come up through sales or engineering or marketing, et cetera? And to be honest, there really isn't a right answer to that question. Product managers and some of the best that I've ever known have come from many different backgrounds. I will admit that accounting and finance is a little bit atypical. So that's why I love your background so much. So thinking about others in accounting or finance or some similar discipline or background, any words of advice that you would give to those who may want to make a career move into a product management role?
Sure. Well, as you point out, my approach certainly wasn't very direct. I think for me, it stemmed back to, in college, I had a minor in computer science. I was sort of interested, but thought that I really wanted to be an accountant, a tax accountant, actually. So there was two big catalysts that kind of helped me with that move into product management. My first was just having some subject matter expertise. So throughout my career, like I said, I kind of started as a tax accountant, and then I moved into general accounting, and then I moved into internal audit, which is now that's my customer base is internal audit. So I know them really well. And that would be the first sort of point that I would suggest is thinking about things if people are thinking about moving into product management is look at what subject matter expertise and business acumen you actually have, because that can be very valuable. The discipline of product management, as I said before, can be learned, but sometimes what product teams really need is that in-depth subject matter expertise on their teams. And then sort of the second catalyst that helped me move across was I've always been quite good at being able to ask the why questions. So I think that's why moving from accounting to internal audit sort of happened for me, as internal auditors ask a lot of why questions. So why did you do it this way? And why does it work best this way? And, what decisions do you make off this? Those are a lot of the same questions that product managers ask on a regular basis when they're getting to know their clients. So if you've got that sort of natural curiosity and you're really good at listening and asking all those why questions, I think being able to demonstrate your analytical skills and then, following on that, if you want to move into product management, learning a few of the basics about product management. Can you write a user story? I'm still surprised when I interview candidates for product management positions that, I guess because I don't come from this background, I'm far more open to interviewing people who don't necessarily have a lot or even any product management experience, because I'm looking to fill different skill sets on my team from time to time. But just some of the basic things like, could you write a user story? So if I gave you a really generic scenario about, I don't know, maybe buying shoes or something that everyone can relate to, could you write me a user story? That's something that's really easy to sort of pick up. And I think just those little things makes it a lot easier to be able to demonstrate that you've got the right mindset to learn the rest of the discipline.
Yeah, that's great. So you mentioned a natural curiosity, and that is something that every single really good product manager that I've worked with has. They are innately curious. They ask why. They keep asking why, and it's not to be contrarian. It is to really get to the meat of the problem, and that natural ability, regardless of career path, is critical. So absolutely. So thanks for sharing that story. It's very interesting, and I appreciate you sharing a little bit of that personal path with us. So again, thank you all for joining. This has been a great discussion. Colleen Knuff, Senior Director of Global Product Management with Wolters Kluwer. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. Global product management is fascinating. It's exciting. It is, frankly, more and more important as we, continue the globalization of our world. But as Colleen has said, it is very difficult. And if you are good at it, then you can succeed, but certainly don't take it lightly when you're moving into new markets. So Colleen, again, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, JJ.
And thank you all for joining us on Masters of Product Management, powered by Sequent Learning Networks. I am JJ Rory, and I look forward to speaking with you on the next episode.
You've been listening to Masters of Product Management, powered by Sequent Learning Networks. If you'd like to take your career to the next level with additional tools, training, coaching, and books, be sure to visit Sequent Learning Networks at sequentlearning.com.